History is written by the winners. But in this new era where we have a democratization of media and the opportunity to share information, we're actually experiencing a shift. And what that's doing is rewriting history. Now, history is written by the winners, but history is also, or has been, written by men. I don't just mean this literally. I mean that history has focused traditionally on commerce, government, war. Until the last half century, most of those were heavily male-dominated pursuits. And we didn't have a sense of women's voices in this history, and yet we know as a culture we have always craved to hear the individual voice. I'm reminded of the letters in Ken Burns' Civil War documentary, The Soldier's Letters, which was a huge part of that documentary and what we all cared about. And one of the most enduring voices from World War II, the 20th century's cataclysmic event, is Anne Frank. The Diary of Anne Frank, user-generated content, and probably one of only maybe 2 to 3 women you can even think of who had a perspective or a voice about World War II. But I'd like you to meet my grandmother. My grandmother was born in Czechoslovakia, and in the late 30s, her husband, his mother, and she moved to France. They wanted her parents to come with them, and they refused, and they perished. My mother was born in February of 1940, and if you know your history, you may know that the Nazis invaded France in June of 1940. So with a less than 4-month-old baby, they got in the car, they drove out of France, over the Pyrenees, into Portugal, took a boat to the United States, didn't have the right visa to stay, went to Brazil, waited it out, came back to the United States, settled in Forest Hills, New York, where my grandmother lived until she died in 2001, and I have just told you everything I know about my grandmother's World War II experience because she would not talk about it. We talked about taking her oral history, and we never did. That story is lost. She told me shortly before she died that she still dreamed about her parents every week. But that story is lost to us. And I think it's a loss for us all when we lose these stories. So meet my mom. My mom was pretty typical of her generation. She graduated from college in June of 1961, got married that same month, moved across the country to California, had her first baby within a year, had 3 children by the time she was 27. And if you ask her now, she says, that was a piece of cake. We were easy. I'd like you to know that I personally apparently woke up from my naps laughing and smiling. I'm awesome. But somehow, in 1975, she decided she wanted to go to work. Not back to work, because she hadn't worked, to work. Didn't sit well with my father. Within 5 years, she was divorced. And so my question is, how could it have been so rosy and you would be willing to make such a sacrifice? My mother is the embodiment of the second wave feminist movement. She is the embodiment of a huge cultural shift, and I don't really know why. Her story is lost. But it's different today. We have the stories of our families, of our friends, and of people that we don't even know. And it helps break down boundaries, both geographic and socioeconomic. So I'd like you to meet Elise Bauer. I'd like to tell you some stories. Elise Bauer, Stanford MBA, high-powered Silicon Valley management consultant, falls ill, can't work, needs to move in with her parents in Sacramento. And she starts a blog to keep sane. And she decides to learn how to cook at the feet of her parents who make dinner together every night. And her blog becomes a story about how we really can make simple recipes that can help us create meals for our loved ones and share that meal together and share the love. Using her technical acumen, she is now the largest food blogger in the world. She has millions of unique visitors a month. This is her livelihood. She has employees. She has completely transformed her life. But if you ask her, her story and her site are still about love. Meet Grace Davis. In 2005, if you were like me, you were watching the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina on the TV and thinking, that can't be the United States of America. She was getting antsy and wanting to do something. So she trolled Craigslist, and she found a woman who posted saying, I have a cell phone and I have a car. I want to do something. I don't know what to do. Grace called her up. They created the Hurricane Disaster Relief blog. The woman in Mississippi would drive around from shelter to shelter and find specific people at specific shelters who had specific needs and find out which specific delivery service could make it there ahead of FEMA and the Red Cross in most cases. Grace would post it on the blog, and people would pack up individual care packages for individual people and ship them. And a year later, a letter came that said, when I opened the box, and there were a pair of diapers in there that were the right size for my child, I knew that no matter how it felt, I was not alone, that people out there cared about what was happening to us. Grace found a new way of taking action, a new way of marshaling resources, and a new way to show love to strangers across the country. And finally, meet Susan Niebur. She's an honest-to-God rocket scientist, NASA. And she also struggled for 4 years to fight different kinds of cancer, starting with infectious breast disease, which often represents without a lump. She didn't just fight for her life, though. She cajoled, she urged, she made her community raise their own awareness and go get checked out for this disease, which is very hard to find. She made them raise money to provide compression sleeves to low-income women struggling with lymphedema because they're often not covered by insurance. And she even raised their consciousness to pay attention to various memes and activities that were supposed to be all about breast cancer awareness, but sometimes left out or alienated the very women they were supposed to be helping, like the "what color is your bra" meme on Facebook when she said, you know what, I don't wear a bra. I don't need a bra. Susan died last year, but if you Google Team Why Mommy, you will find out what her legacy of love is. So what does all this mean? Love and stories. Well, what it means is that we're connecting with people from many different perspectives, and it's giving us a new understanding. When I grew up, our resources for news were very limited, and I've heard many people lament, oh, it was much deeper back then. It's so shallow now, 140 characters, la, la, la. But you know what? The people who made this news all looked pretty much the same. And they came from the same background and probably the same socioeconomic strata. So sure, it was deep in many ways, and I respect so much work, but it was shallow in other ways. And now, if you want to know the voice of someone living through a situation on any side of the ideological spectrum, you can find it. You can hear from people what they really think and feel. You are not reliant on only a theoretically objective observer when we're never, ever really objective. And that is literally rewriting history. That is making change. Now, there are those who say armchair activism, that's so easy, it's not really changing anything, to which I say bullshit. We are coming together. We do not have to be part of ongoing organizations. We are a collective of loosely joined people who decide we have passion and belief around a topic and raise our voice. And we can change what companies do. We can change legislation. We can change what the media pays attention to. And it's all because we have access to the stories of people who are different from us, not just people who are the same, and people who have first-person experience with what we're talking about. So it's a tremendous amount of power. You have the power to change your own livelihood, your own business. You have the power to change your community. You have the power to change the world. And the question is, what will you do with it right now? Because it's true that not all of us have to change the world. But now, we all have the power to, and that really is rewriting history. Thank you.